Tammy Bruce is with us, Independent Women's Voice president and Fox News contributor. I say it's a hard line. I say it's the only line that will work. Do you agree with me?
I do. Not that you're not a man always with opinions. And this is very, very clear. The president, I view the president as chemotherapy. Very aggressive framework that's needed, and to deal with a very particular thing, but in the long run, to make the body healthy and strong again. So it can be a shock. It has to be a shock. It has to be a hard line, as you say. He cannot withdraw. And this is why we also know, of course, the difference for him is he's not worrying about what his next job will be. He's not doing this for himself. He's not doing this because of the long-range people he has to pay back in a political party. He's doing it for the American people. And he's also learned in the last 2 years that, unlike in a business, politicians don't necessarily have everyone's best interests in mind and really getting the job done. That's why it must be a harder line than maybe he expected, but that he'll be able to deliver.
But it will be a hard line in public. But I suspect the hard line will not carry through to, for example, any agreement with China. We're not going to get them to say, we'll never, ever take your technology ever again, and we will never, ever steal your software and your intellectual property. That's not going to happen.
Yes.
There will be a fudge.
Yeah, they'll cheat. They'll say certain things. They'll make certain steps to do better. But where this strength comes in is when China is in deep trouble. And that eventually will occur. And so that we will then have even more leverage when people, as the world is learning, the president means business. He does what he says. He's not kidding. We are stronger than they are, and they will need us. So this is the beginning of the establishment of the relationship about what they will really eventually have to do. But we've got to shock them out of what they've been doing in the past. Both politicians here, tyrants around the world, and socialist governments have gotten very fat and cozy. And now they're realizing Daddy is home.
You threw me with the last line.
Well, yes.
Hardline Trump, hardline Tammy Bruce.
There you go.
Good
Hardline
stuff.
Americans. Really, we care. We want the future back.
Susan's giving you a look.
I like that last line.
Yeah, good stuff. Stay there, Tammy. I've got something else for you a bit later on.
Yes,
I want to get back to your money for a moment. Stocks. We're going to show you some stocks on the screen. We've got McDonald's, Coca-Cola, Walmart, P&G. Got it. All these stocks, they weathered the recent selling storm. So says our next guest, David Barnson, CIO of the Barnson Group. What do they all have in common? If you're right, if they've all weathered the storm, so to speak, what's the commonality between them?
The commonality between them is dividend growth. It's the fact that they have a non-cyclical flow of earnings that enables them to continue growing their free cash flow and continue a stable and dependable, something investors can depend on in terms of the consistency of the return. So they're not high growth names. They're not going to be your biggest returners in every period of time. But, you're looking at Procter & Gamble up 16% over the last 3 months. McDonald's about the same. Johnson & Johnson, which is a full 30% of consumer staples in their revenue, is up 6 or 7%. Coca-Cola about 8%. So these are all names that we own, all names that are significant positions for us that have weathered the storm very well.
Johnson & Johnson reportedly knew that there was a little bit of asbestos in their talcum powder, and they knew for decades. That stock is way down today. Did you see that coming? Because you own it.
Yeah, did I see that coming? That's funny. The headline risk around these different litigation things with Johnson & Johnson has been going on since 1935, and I believe there will continue to be various issues that pop up on that name. But my point being that the cash flows, the balance sheet of all these companies too, Stuart, that's another thing we have to look to. They're not overly indebted, so they're not as susceptible to reversals in good fortunes. When they come across a cyclical, problem or challenge, they have the ability and the financial strength to weather through it. I like all those names, and I don't think you can say it about every name in the sector.
That's true.
Look at Kellogg, look at Kraft Heinz, that are down almost 20% in the last 3 months. So it isn't just the entire sector happens to be a flight to safety. We hear people say that a lot. It actually is a bottom-up, really strong company performance-driven dynamic.
What are you buying right now? As I understand it, you are buying Blackstone. BX is the symbol. And as you know, David, as our viewers know, I bought it on your recommendation because it pays a 6, maybe 7% dividend. But the thing has gone down since I bought it. Explain yourself.
Well, first of all, if I recall where you bought it, it went straight up and then came down and then went up and then came down. So it's been a roller coaster of price ownership, and that's going to continue, I think, for some time. It doesn't get a lot more cyclical with capital markets than Blackstone. But what is not cyclical, Stuart, is why I told you to buy it, which is the dividend, the return of cash to shareholders, which right now at this price, the yield is actually about 8%.
Yep, that's right.
And is a direct flow that is coming through to investors quarter after quarter. Right now, the stock is at the same place it was 10 years ago, except for the company has grown 500% because they've returned so much cash to shareholders along the way. Now, I can make an argument for why I believe the stock is deeply undervalued. It's the same argument that Steve Schwartzman, their CEO, would make. But my point is that you have a high degree of leverage with Blackstone to global capital markets. They're asset managers. You don't have the risk of their balance sheet. They're not investing with their own capital. Blackstone is getting fees to manage assets, and they're unbelievably good at it.
Okay.
So you get the fee revenue, which is highly consistent and comes through to you and I in their dividend. But then it also has the what they call realizations or carry interest. When they make profits, we're getting a piece of that.
Okay.
That's the kind of growth catalyst. That's
David,
my argument.
I am reassured. I'm not selling.
Good.
I'll milk the dividend, okay? David, thank you very much indeed. Good to see you again, fella. See you soon. Thank you.
Good to see you.
News on Facebook. As I understand it, a bug that might have affected millions of users, but you tell me more, Sue.
And might have access to photos that you didn't actually upload on the site for everyone to see. So 6.8 million users, up to 1,500 apps built by 876 developers that may have had access to photos that you uploaded onto the site, but you didn't post for the public consumption. How about that?
Wow.
But still, that's concerning. And well, because of this bug, some third-party apps may have had access to the broader set of photos for 12 days, and they're being very specific here in September of this year. Yeah, so Facebook says that they are recommending that people log into any apps which they have shared their Facebook photos to, check which photos have had access, and obviously change your login at this point.
That takes your breath away when you think about that. That really does.
And it's another bad headline as well. The stock is down over 1%, isn't it?
Yep, it is. Breaking news here.